My name is Clara Brooks, and I am 71 years old. If anyone had told me that my own daughter, the child I carried in my body for 9 long months, the girl whose tears I wiped away, whose hands I held through storms and heartbreaks, would one day look at me as nothing more than an obstacle in her path, I would have laughed in disbelief. But disbelief turned into a cruel reality the afternoon she called me from across the ocean of her own heart and severed the bond between us with a voice as cold as winter. "Mom," she said sharply, as if reciting a business transaction, "we sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. We're leaving for Europe tomorrow. Goodbye." That was it. No pause, no tremor, no apology. Just those words, slicing through me like a blade. I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room, surrounded by strangers flipping through old magazines, coughing into tissues, staring at the floor. Their lives carried on, oblivious, while mine collapsed. For 45 years I had raised Angela, sacrificed everything for her future, given her the love and protection that I thought no one could question. And in the span of 20 seconds, she discarded me like I was a piece of useless furniture in a house she no longer wanted. The phone slipped in my hand, but I didn't let it fall. My body trembled, but I did not cry. I had cried too many tears in the past 6 months, since my husband Robert died. That day, something different happened inside me. A strange calm took hold, one I had not felt since before death darkened my doorstep. Because in that moment, with Angela's cold words still echoing in my ears, I remembered something she didn't know, and that secret was going to change everything. Before I tell you the rest, I want to ask you something. If your own child betrayed you this way, if they sold your memories, your sacrifices, and laughed while walking away, what would you do? Would you forgive them and welcome them back with open arms? Or would you make sure they understood the consequences of betrayal? Comment below where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss more stories like this one. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. It had been 6 months since Robert, my husband of 45 years, died in our kitchen. The morning was ordinary, almost painfully so. He kissed my forehead the way he always did, set a warm cup of coffee in front of me, and said the words he had repeated every morning of our married life. "Good morning, my love." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. His heart gave out as he lifted a piece of toast. One moment, he was smiling. The next, his body collapsed across the table, leaving me gasping his name into the empty air. After that, silence became my companion. Every room in our home was heavy with him, the smell of his aftershave on the pillow, the sound of his favorite chair creaking when I sat in it, the sight of his neatly folded work jacket by the door. Even his old Ford truck, parked faithfully under the oak tree out front, carried his scent. That truck was his pride and joy. Every Sunday he would wash it, whistling softly as he polished the chrome, as if keeping it alive was part of keeping himself alive too. And then there was the beach house. Oh, the beach house. Robert and I bought it when Angela was 15. It was our sanctuary, the place where summers tasted like grilled fish and salt water, where Christmas mornings were lit not just by a tree but by the glow of family. Angela brought her boyfriends there, later her husband Edward. I cooked, cleaned, and made the house sing with life, while they laughed on the porch overlooking the ocean. That house was built with sweat and love, not just bricks and wood. So when Angela's voice told me she had sold it just like that, as if it were a pair of shoes she no longer needed, I felt something inside me snap. She hadn't just sold property, she had sold memories. She had sold my husband's devotion. She had sold me. But still, I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled bitterly in that green plastic chair at the doctor's office, surrounded by people who had no idea that the woman beside them had just lost the last threads of her family. Why? Because I remembered. 3 days before Robert died, he handed me a sealed manila envelope. His eyes were serious, more serious than I had ever seen them. "Clara," he whispered, "put this in your dresser drawer. If something happens to me, open it only when you feel ready." At the time, I didn't question it. I tucked it away, thinking it was perhaps insurance forms or funeral instructions. After his death, I was drowning in grief, in arrangements, in Angela's hovering presence, so I forgot all about it. Until that phone call. As the nurse called my name, I walked into the doctor's office and sat stiffly while he poked and prodded. He smiled gently and said, "You're in excellent health for your age, Mrs. Brooks. Just rest more, eat well, and you'll be fine." Fine. He had no idea that my daughter had just cut me open with words sharper than any scalpel. I nodded, thanked him, and left with my handbag pressed tight against my ribs, not because of the doctor's advice, but because of the envelope that waited in my drawer. I rode the bus home because, according to Angela, I no longer had a car. The city moved past my window, children chasing after each other on sidewalks, couples laughing in cafes, men in suits glued to their phones. Each one of them carried invisible battles. Mine was simply larger, heavier, and crueler. When I stepped into my quiet house, dusk was already spreading its long fingers across the floorboards. I went straight to my bedroom, pulled open the dresser drawer, and there it was, untouched, waiting. The envelope. My name written in Robert's careful handwriting. I sat on the edge of the bed we had shared for decades. My heart pounded like it hadn't in months. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Slowly, as though I were unwrapping a final gift from the man who had loved me more than anyone, I slid out the contents, and what I found inside took my breath away. The papers spilled into my lap, deeds, certificates, and a thick folded letter in Robert's neat handwriting. For a long moment I just stared, afraid to breathe, afraid that opening them might dissolve the fragile hope flickering inside me. Finally, I unfolded the letter, and my husband's voice came alive across the page. My dear Clara, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for not sharing everything sooner. I wanted you to live without the burden of worry. Over the years, I invested every dollar of our savings carefully, quietly. I bought properties, shares in businesses, and built a company in your name. What you hold in your hands is proof. You are not only secure, you are far richer than you ever imagined. You are the owner of multiple properties, including the apartment building where Angela and Edward live. Please, my love, use this wisely. Do not let greed or betrayal destroy the heart we built our family on. With eternal love, Robert. My vision blurred as tears welled. All those years of simple living, clipping coupons, patching Angela's clothes, driving an old truck instead of buying new, all while Robert had been quietly building a fortune behind the scenes. A bus driver by day, but a shrewd investor by night. And I had never known. I wiped my cheeks, my hands trembling as I spread the documents across the bed. There it was in black and white, 6 houses scattered across different neighborhoods, a downtown condo, even a small motel on the coast. And the 20-story apartment building Angela lived in? Mine. Through a company Robert had created years ago. Robert Investments, Incorporated. I was the sole heir, the sole owner, the silent queen of everything Angela thought belonged to her. The irony was almost too much to bear. Angela had called me, her voice like ice, to tell me she had sold my beach house and my truck, patting herself on the back for depositing a so-called 30% share into my account. She believed she had left me nearly penniless, scrambling for survival. In reality, she had nothing. The ground beneath her feet, the roof above her head, all of it was mine. For months, I had felt powerless, a widow too fragile to defend herself. But that night, as shadows crawled across the walls of my bedroom, I realized the truth. I wasn't powerless at all. I was holding every card. Angela thought she had stripped me bare. In reality, she had only revealed her true self and handed me the perfect opportunity to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The next morning, I didn't collapse into grief as I had so many times before. Instead, I rose with a clarity that startled me. I brewed coffee, buttered toast, and sat at the kitchen table where Robert had breathed his last words. I laid out the documents one by one, the paper cool beneath my fingers, and began to plan. Angela's betrayal had cut me deeply, but I wasn't going to fight her with screaming or lawsuits. No, that would be too easy, too loud. She would expect me to rage, to beg, to collapse. Instead, I would remain silent. I would let her believe she had triumphed, let her run off to Europe with her arrogant husband, laughing at how easily they had fooled me. And then, when the time was right, I would reveal the truth. Not in anger, but in precision. Not to destroy her, but to show her what happens when you confuse kindness for weakness. That afternoon, the phone rang again. Angela's voice oozed false sweetness. "Mom, just checking in. I hope you're okay. We transferred the money to your account. You'll be fine for a while, right? Edward and I are leaving this evening. 6 months in Europe, maybe longer if the business does well." I clenched my jaw. Business. Edward had never built anything in his life beyond a pile of debt and empty promises. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I replied evenly. "Have a safe trip." "Oh, Mom," she crooned. "You've always been so compassionate. That's why I knew you'd understand." And then she hung up. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the wall. Compassion. That was the word she used as she gutted my life. For decades, I had sacrificed for her. And now she had the audacity to speak of compassion? I walked to the window just in time to see them loading their luggage into a cab. Angela's silk scarf fluttered in the breeze. Edward's smug grin stretched ear to ear. They looked like children running away to summer camp, not thieves abandoning the woman who had given them everything. They never looked toward my window. Not once. Not even for goodbye. And yet, instead of despair, laughter bubbled in my chest. It startled me sharp, bitter, almost hysterical. I laughed because the absurdity was too much to contain. My daughter had robbed me blind and thought she'd left me helpless, but she had no idea that the real game hadn't even started. That night, I called Mr. Peterson, the lawyer who had handled Robert's small matters years ago. At the funeral, he had told me, "If you ever need me, call." Now, I needed him more than ever. "Mrs. Brooks," he said warmly when he picked up, "it's good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted, "but I found something. Papers, properties, investments Robert left in my name. I need to understand them, urgently." There was a pause on the other end. "Bring them to my office tomorrow morning. We'll go through everything." When I hung up, I sat in the dim kitchen with the documents spread before me like a general studying maps before a battle. For months, I had been a woman drowning in grief. Now, I was something else, something I hadn't been in a long time. I was a woman with a secret. I was a woman with power. And for the first time since Robert died, I knew exactly what I had to do. The morning air was crisp when I stepped out of the house the next day, Robert's envelope tucked firmly inside my handbag. I had barely slept. My mind had been racing all night, replaying Angela's voice, Robert's words, and the weight of those deeds spread across my kitchen table. For 6 months I had been drifting like a ship without a compass. Now I had a destination, and I was ready to sail straight into the storm. Downtown was alive with its usual rhythm horns honking, buses rumbling past, vendors shouting the day's specials. Strangers brushed against me as though I were invisible, and maybe to them I was just another widow in a dark dress. But I knew better. I clutched my purse tight, my heels clicking against the pavement, like the steady beat of a drum. I was no longer walking in grief. I was marching toward war. Mr. Peterson's office stood tall in a marble building that had clearly seen better days. Its brass handles gleamed from years of polishing, and the lobby smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. By the time I reached his door, my heart was hammering, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to be spoken aloud for the first time. He greeted me warmly, his graying hair neatly combed, his eyes kind but sharp. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, taking my hand. "Please, sit. What brings you here?" I slid the envelope across his polished desk. "This." He raised a brow, curiosity sparking. "From Robert?" "Yes. He left it for me before he died. I only just remembered." Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses, carefully pulling out the documents. For several long minutes, the only sound was the rustle of paper as he read. With every turn of a page, his expression shifted, first surprise, then disbelief, and finally something like awe. He leaned back at last, exhaling slowly. "Mrs. Brooks, do you have any idea what you're sitting on?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Enough to make my daughter regret underestimating me?" A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Much more than that. These deeds, these bank accounts, this is a fortune. Robert was very smart, very discreet. According to these records, you are the sole owner of 6 properties, multiple accounts, and a corporate entity that controls—" He paused, his eyes widening as he read one line again. "The apartment building where Angela lives." For a moment, the air left my lungs. I had suspected, after reading Robert's letter, but hearing it confirmed by a lawyer made the truth real. The very roof Angela lived under, the apartment she called hers, wasn't hers at all. It was mine. Mr. Peterson continued. "Robert Investments, Incorporated was created over 10 years ago, Robert set it up so everything would funnel into your name without drawing attention. Every share of that company belongs to you now. Legally, Angela has no rights to any of this." The irony tasted sweet on my tongue. Angela thought she had stripped me bare, but in reality she had been living inside my property like a spoiled tenant. "What about the beach house?" I asked softly, my fingers tightening around my purse. Mr. Peterson frowned. "She sold it?" "Yes. And Robert's truck." He shook his head. "Both transactions were fraudulent. She had no legal claim to sell either. We can nullify the sales immediately and recover them, and if you wish, we can pursue legal action for fraud." I stared at the grain of his desk, imagining Angela's smug face when she handed over the keys to strangers, believing she was clever. "No," I said finally. "No police. No courtroom. Not yet. I don't want her dragged into scandal. I don't want her to know I hold the power. Not until the moment is right." Mr. Peterson studied me carefully. "So what do you want, Mrs. Brooks?" I met his gaze with steady eyes. "I want discretion. I want every piece of what's mine quietly restored, and I want the freedom to choose when, where, and how my daughter learns the truth." There was a pause, and then he nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "Very well. It will take some weeks, but I can manage it, quietly." Relief mingled with determination in my chest. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt like I had direction, not just surviving, not just breathing, but planning. "Mr. Peterson," I added, my voice low, "I don't want revenge in the sense you might think. I don't want to ruin Angela. I want her to understand, to feel what I felt when she discarded me, to taste powerlessness, to realize that betrayal comes at a cost. Can you help me with that?" He leaned forward slightly. "I can help you, Mrs. Brooks, but may I say something?" "Yes. You may be underestimating yourself. You speak of teaching her a lesson as though it's vengeance. But I hear something else in your tone. You want justice, perhaps even redemption." I said nothing, only gathered the papers back into the envelope. He was right, though I would never admit it aloud. Deep inside, the mother in me still hoped Angela might find her way back, not to the money but to me. When I left his office, the sun had climbed higher, bathing the city in light. I walked slower this time, savoring each step. The people rushing past me looked the same as they had in the morning, but to me, everything was different. They didn't know that the woman in the burgundy dress walking among them wasn't a broken widow anymore. She was a woman with a fortune in her handbag and a fire in her chest. That night, I sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I had shared countless meals. I spread the documents before me once again, but now they looked different. Not just numbers and deeds, these were weapons. Shields, keys. I lit a candle, the small flame flickering in the dark room, and whispered into the silence. "Robert, you were right. You always planned ahead. Now it's my turn. She thinks she won. She thinks she left me with nothing. But when the time comes, she'll see. I was never powerless." The candlelight trembled across the papers, and for the first time in 6 long months, I felt alive. The days that followed blurred together in a strange haze of anticipation. For 6 months, my life had been a monotonous cycle of grief, waking up to silence, cooking for one, staring at Robert's chair as if he might walk back into it. But now, everything felt electric. I woke with purpose. I ate with focus. My mind was alive, weaving possibilities like threads in a loom. Angela, meanwhile, had vanished to Europe with Edward. They left like thieves in the night, without so much as a wave to the neighbors. Aurora, my kind but nosy neighbor across the street, stopped by one morning with a basket of muffins. "Clara, dear," she said, lowering her voice as though delivering scandal, "I heard Angela and Edward just packed up and flew away. Is it true?" "Yes," I replied calmly, slicing a muffin in half. "They had business opportunities." Aurora clucked her tongue. "Business opportunities?" That Edward never struck me as the hard-working type, always seemed slippery. I smiled politely, but inside I thought, slippery doesn't even begin to describe him. When Aurora left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, watching the shadows move across the walls. Angela believed she had triumphed. She thought she had stripped me of the only things that tethered me to Robert the beach house and the truck. She thought her 30% gift was generous, a poor widow's allowance to survive on. What she didn't know was that her triumph was a lie. And lies have a way of crumbling under the weight of truth. A week later, Mr. Peterson called. "Mrs. Brooks, I've reviewed the sales records of your beach house and your husband's truck. Both transactions were illegal. Your daughter had no right to sell them." A sharp satisfaction bloomed in my chest. "And can they be reversed?" "Yes, quietly. The buyers were innocent, but once they learn the sale was fraudulent, they'll be refunded and the property will revert to you." "Good," I said firmly. "Make it happen, but under no circumstances is Angela to know." "As you wish," he replied. That night, I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite wine, the bottle he had saved for special occasions. I sipped slowly, savoring the taste of silent victory. From my window, I could still see the empty driveway where his truck. Once Saturday, it pained me to think of another man's hands on that steering wheel, another family sitting inside what was once ours. But soon it would be back, and when it returned, it wouldn't just be a vehicle, it would be proof. Proof that Angela's betrayal could never truly erase Robert from my life. The next morning, the phone rang again. It was Angela. Her tone was strangely cheerful, almost patronizing, as though she were speaking to a child. "Mom, I just wanted to tell you we deposited your 30% from the sales into your account. It should help you for a few months while you look for something smaller. Edward and I are already packed. Our flight leaves this afternoon." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. "That's very thoughtful of you, Angela. When do you expect to return?" "Oh, who knows?" she laughed breezily. 6 months, maybe longer. It depends on how well the business goes. Don't worry, Mom. When we come back, we'll help you find a little apartment. Something that fits your needs." Fits my needs. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, as if my daughter knew what I needed, as if I were an inconvenience to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished. "Of course, honey," I said softly. "Have a safe trip." "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so compassionate. We love you." And with that, she hung up. I set the phone down gently, then burst into laughter. Not joyful laughter, no. This was sharp, bitter, edged with irony. I laughed because the situation was absurd. My daughter had robbed me, discarded me, and spoken to me with unbearable condescension, all while I sat on a fortune she could not even imagine. From the window, I watched them leave. Angela in her silk scarf, Edward dragging their expensive suitcases, both of them laughing like children headed for summer camp. They climbed into the cab without glancing back. Not once did they look toward my house, my window, my heart. When the cab disappeared down the street, I turned back to the table where Robert's documents still lay. I touched the paper, the ink, the signatures. They felt alive beneath my fingertips. That was when the decision crystallized in me, like ice hardening in water. I would not confront Angela with anger. I would not drag her to court or expose her theft to the neighbors. No, that would give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had the power to wound me. Instead, I would bide my time. I would watch. I would wait. And when the moment came, I would reveal the truth not as vengeance, but as education. Angela thought she had left me powerless. What she didn't know was that Robert had left me stronger than ever. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, candlelight flickering across the walls. I looked at Robert's chair, empty yet full of memory, and whispered, "You planned for this, didn't you? You always knew she might betray us. You always knew." The silence seemed to answer me, and for the first time since he died, I didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual, the first light of dawn spilling across my curtains. For the first time in months, I felt awake not just physically, but in spirit. The grief that had once pinned me to my bed like a heavy stone was gone, replaced by something sharper, cleaner, determination. I dressed carefully, choosing Robert's favorite wine-colored dress, brushed my silver hair into place, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the weak widow Angela believed she had left behind. No, she was someone stronger, someone with a plan. Downtown, I returned to Mr. Peterson's office. He greeted me with the same calm professionalism as before, but I saw the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. I was no longer a client in mourning. I was a woman ready to act. "Mrs. Brooks," he began, "I've already started the process of nullifying the fraudulent sales. The beach house will return to your name within the week. The truck will take longer, but it's feasible." "Good," I said firmly. "And the other properties?" He gestured to a thick folder on his desk. "All secure. You are the sole owner." Robert was meticulous. Everything is legally airtight. I exhaled slowly, relief and pride swirling in my chest. Robert had thought of everything. Even from the grave, he was protecting me. Now, Mr. Peterson continued cautiously, what do you intend to do about Angela? I leaned back in my chair, letting silence stretch before answering. Nothing. Not yet. She believes she's left me powerless. Let her. I want her to live in that illusion. And when she returns, I smiled faintly, she will discover that the life she thought was hers is built on foundations she never owned. Mr. Peterson studied me closely. That's a unique approach, Mrs. Brooks. Most people would want immediate legal retribution. I don't want revenge in the eyes of the law, I said quietly. I want something deeper. I want her to learn, and for that I need patience. He nodded, though I could see he was intrigued. Very well. I will proceed discreetly. No one will know. When I left his office, the city seemed brighter. The marble buildings gleamed, the streets hummed, and for the first time in half a year, I felt part of life again. But my life now had two layers, the one the world saw and the one only I knew. In the weeks that followed, I perfected this double life. To my neighbors, I remained the poor widow abandoned by her ungrateful daughter. Aurora would stop by with groceries or gossip, her eyes filled with pity. "Oh, Clara," she would sigh, "we're all so sorry Angela left you like that. How will you manage?" I would lower my eyes and smile weakly. "One day at a time, dear. One day at a time." Inside, however, the truth pulsed like a secret flame. Every morning, I sat at the kitchen table studying Robert's documents, learning about investments, property law, and the company I now owned. Mr. Peterson called me regularly with updates. The beach house back in my name, the truck in negotiation, the building paperwork transferred to my direct control. It was exhilarating, living in plain sight while carrying a truth no one suspected. One afternoon, I took a bus to the coast to see the beach house again. The journey felt strange without Robert at my side, no quiet jokes, no thermos of coffee shared between us. But when I stepped off the bus and saw the cream-colored house perched against the ocean, my breath caught. It was exactly as I remembered. The porch still overlooked the rolling waves. The garden Robert and I had planted was overgrown but alive. The scent of salt water carried with it decades of laughter. Angela building sandcastles at 15, Robert grilling fish while I tossed salads in the kitchen, birthdays and Christmas mornings bathed in sunlight. I sat across the street for an hour, simply staring. Tears burned my eyes, not just from nostalgia but from the betrayal. Angela had reduced all those memories to cash, sold them without hesitation, lied to strangers about me being sick and desperate. To her, I wasn't a mother with a heart and history. I was an obstacle in the way of her next adventure. When I returned home that night, the house felt different. Not empty, but watchful. As though Robert's spirit was there, approving every step I was taking. Mr. Peterson called again the following week. "Mrs. Brooks, I have more news. The buyers of the truck were traced. They're willing to return it once we refund them. It will be yours again soon." I smiled, relief warming me. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And the building? That's more complicated," he admitted. "But legally, you've always been the owner through Robert's company. We just need to restructure the paperwork to give you direct control. It may take another 2 weeks." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "And one more thing," he added. Angela had Edward co-sign several questionable loans using that apartment as collateral. Once the banks realize she never owned it, there will be added complications. My lips curved into a thin smile. Let the complications come. It will be the first crack in their illusion. That night, I sat at the kitchen table once again, the documents neatly stacked before me. The candle flickered, shadows dancing across Robert's handwriting. "Angela," I whispered into the silence, "you think you've taken everything from me. But what you don't know is that every step you take, every lie you tell, every debt Edward drags you into it all leads back to me. And when the time comes, you'll learn what it feels like to lose everything. Not through anger, through truth." I closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't in months. Not grief, not rage, but power. A power I intended to wield carefully, precisely, until my daughter finally understood what her betrayal had cost. The following week settled into a rhythm I had never expected two lives, running side by side. By morning, I was the picture of a frail widow. I shuffled to the corner store with my cloth bag, accepted pitying smiles from neighbors, and endured whispered gossip about my poor circumstances. They all thought Angela had abandoned me with nothing, and in a way, I let them believe it. There was power in pity, in letting people underestimate you. Clara, Mrs. Henderson from down the block, whispered one day as she pressed a loaf of bread into my hands. Don't be too proud to ask for help. We know times are hard now that Angela's gone. I lowered my eyes, smiled weakly, and replied, Thank you, dear. I'll be fine, one step at a time. But when I returned home, when the door shut behind me, the transformation was immediate. I shed the mask of fragility like an old shawl. At my kitchen table, I became someone else entirely sharp-eyed, steady-handed, studying Robert's documents as if they were sacred texts. Every afternoon, I received calls from Mr. Peterson. The beach house title is officially back in your name, he reported one Tuesday. Excellent, I replied, making a neat note in the ledger I had begun keeping. The truck negotiations are nearly complete, he told me the following Friday. The current owner agreed to return it for a modest settlement. Do it, I ordered without hesitation. And the apartment building where Angela lived? That was the crown jewel. The legal restructuring took time, but as each piece fell into place, the power shifted more and more into my hands. I would sip my tea in the evenings, glance at the folder of deeds stacked neatly on the table, and smile. Officially, I was the poor widow, abandoned and pitied. Secretly, I was the landlord of my daughter's life. One afternoon, I decided to visit the beach house myself. I boarded the bus, my heart pounding as the familiar road unfurled before me. Without Robert by my side, the journey felt longer, lonelier, but also filled with purpose. When the bus dropped me off, the salty wind whipped through my hair. There it was, the cream-colored house standing sturdy against the ocean breeze. My breath caught as memories washed over me. Angela, at 15, running barefoot through the sand, Robert grilling fish while I chopped vegetables, Christmas mornings where the porch glowed with light and laughter. But now, those memories carried a bitter taste. Angela had sold this place like it was nothing more than a piece of jewelry she no longer wanted. She had told strangers I was sick, desperate, unable to manage my affairs. Lies to grease her betrayal. I stood across the street, staring at the house, until the sky turned pink. A man watering the porch plants noticed me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called kindly. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I replied softly, just remembering. "Such a shame what happened," he said, shaking his head. "We were told the elderly owner needed to sell fast because of illness. But apparently the sale wasn't legal. We had to give it back. Lost the house, but at least we got our money returned. Illness." So Angela had painted me as weak, pathetic, incapable. A convenient story to justify her theft. "Did you know them?" the man asked. "I knew them very well," I whispered, then turned away before he could ask more. I walked back to the bus stop with tears burning in my eyes, but not from grief, from fury. Angela hadn't just stolen from me, she had rewritten me. To her, I wasn't a mother or even a person. I was a problem to erase. That night, Mr. Peterson called again. "Mrs. Brooks, I've uncovered more. Edward has significant debts. He's taken out loans in Angela's name, some with forged signatures. Once the banks realize she never owned the apartment, there will be consequences." I closed my eyes, a cold satisfaction curling through me. "Let the consequences come." There was silence on the line. "You're very calm about this, Mrs. Brooks. Most clients panic when they hear about debts." "I'm not most clients," I replied. "And Angela needs to taste what I tasted when she left me in that waiting room with nothing but her cold voice. I want her to learn, and sometimes lessons require pain." Mr. Peterson hesitated before answering. "As you wish. I'll proceed quietly." Weeks passed. To the outside world, I was the lonely widow surviving on scraps of kindness from neighbors. But inside, I was building an empire brick by brick, deed by deed. I walked the streets with my head slightly bowed, and no one suspected that the woman in the faded cardigan was wealthier than nearly everyone around her. I let them whisper. I let them pity me. Because when Angela returned, broken from Edward's lies, she would come back to a mother she thought was powerless, only to discover that I had been holding the reins all along. At night, I sat by the window, candle flickering on the table, Robert's documents spread before me. I spoke softly into the silence, as though he were still listening. You planned for this, didn't you, Robert? You knew she might betray us. You knew I'd need strength. Well, I have it now, and I swear to you, she'll learn. Not through yelling, not through courts, not through prison, through truth, through consequences. She will see what it feels like to be discarded. The flame wavered, and for a moment I imagined Robert smiling in approval. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and whispered, "The game has begun." The first real crack in Angela's illusion came sooner than I expected. It was Aurora, my lifelong neighbor, who carried the news. She appeared at my door one brisk morning, cheeks flushed from walking too quickly, excitement in her eyes. "Clara," she said breathlessly, "you won't believe what I heard. Edward's in trouble with the bank. My brother-in-law works there, he says. Edward took out loans using your daughter's apartment as collateral. But the bank just discovered he isn't the legal owner. Everything's about to collapse." I kept my face carefully composed, though inside I felt the spark of vindication ignite. "Really?" I murmured, feigning surprise. "Yes, and apparently Angela knew nothing about it. They say she might have to come back from Europe to deal with the mess." Aurora leaned closer, lowering her voice as though the walls might be listening. "And between you and me, Edward wasn't completely honest with her. He told everyone he had a business opportunity in Europe, but there was never any such thing. He just wanted to escape." I pressed my hand to my chest, as if the news shocked me. Oh dear, how complicated. But in truth it was perfect. Edward had betrayed Angela the same way Angela had betrayed me, using lies, secrecy, and greed. It was poetic. That evening, I poured myself a glass of Robert's favorite red wine and sat on the porch, staring at the stars. He used to say the stars were the souls of people who had lived full lives, watching over their families from the sky. "Are you watching, Robert?" I whispered. "Everything is falling into place." Mr. Peterson called the next day. His voice carried urgency. "Mrs. Brooks, your intuition was correct. Edward is drowning in debt, over $200,000, spread across multiple banks and even some private lenders. Worse, he used falsified documents with Angela's signature. Legally, she is responsible for much of it." My grip tightened on the phone. "And can we prove she had no knowledge?" "It will be difficult. We'd need strong evidence of fraud, but I believe it's possible. Still, the process could be long and costly. $50,000 in legal fees, perhaps more." I smiled faintly. "Money is not the issue, Mr. Peterson. Discretion is." He paused, then asked carefully, "Do you intend to protect your daughter?" "Yes, but not yet. First, she must feel the weight of her choices. She must understand what it means to trust the wrong person, just as I trusted her." There was silence on the line. I could almost hear him studying me, trying to decide whether I was ruthless or wise. Perhaps both. "As you wish," he finally said. 2 weeks later, Aurora knocked again, her voice hushed with scandal. "Clara, did you hear? Angela came back last night. Alone. I saw her arrive with just one suitcase. Edward stayed behind in Europe. Rumor is they fought terribly. She looked awful, Clara, like a ghost of herself." I concealed my satisfaction. "Thank you, dear. I'll pray for her." But inside, my pulse quickened. My daughter was back on American soil, vulnerable, broken, and soon she would receive the letter. Because while she was still in Europe, I had instructed Mr. Peterson to prepare something special, an eviction notice. Angela had kicked me out of my own house with a 2-minute phone call. Now I would return the gesture with a letter of my own. The next afternoon, Mr. Peterson confirmed it. "Mrs. Brooks, the eviction notice was delivered to your daughter in person this morning. She has 30 days to vacate the apartment." "Perfect," I said calmly. "Are you absolutely sure about this? She is your daughter, after all." "Mr. Peterson," I replied, my voice steady, "my daughter discarded me like garbage. She will now learn that actions have consequences. I am not doing this out of hatred. I am doing this because it is the only way she will truly understand." He sighed softly. "Very well." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, imagining Angela's face when she read the letter. The confusion, the disbelief, the creeping panic. Perhaps she would think it was a scam. Perhaps she would call me, desperate for clarity. And when she did, I would be ready. The call came at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning. "Mom," Angela's voice cracked through the line, laced with desperation. I need to talk to you urgently." "Good morning, dear," I answered evenly. "How was Europe?" "Mom, I don't have time for that. I got a letter yesterday. It says I have to leave my apartment in 30 days. It has to be a mistake. Do you know anything about this?" I let a pause linger. "An eviction notice? How strange. From whom?" "From some company I've never heard of. It's called Robert Investments, Incorporated. Do you know them?" My heart squeezed. Robert had used his own name for the company. How poetic. "No, honey. I've never heard of them. Are you sure the letter is real?" Angela's voice wavered. "That's what I'm trying to find out. Edward left me in Europe. He ran off with another woman. And now I come back to this. I don't know what's happening." There it was, the confirmation I had been waiting for. Edward had abandoned her. She had sacrificed me for him, and he had tossed her aside without hesitation. "I'm so sorry, honey," I said softly. "Where are you now?" "In the apartment. But I don't know for how long. Mom, can I come see you, please? I don't have anyone else." The irony was almost unbearable. She had left me with nothing, certain she'd never need me again. And now, when her world was collapsing, she remembered she had a mother. "Of course, darling," I replied sweetly. "Come whenever you like." As I hung up the phone, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. My lips were curved in a smile, but my eyes were cold. Angela thought she was coming back to a broken widow. What she would find instead was a mother who had risen from the ashes, holding all the cards. I prepared myself carefully before Angela arrived. It had to be perfect, the performance of a lifetime. I put on my most modest gray dress, pulled my hair back into a simple bun, and dusted my cheeks with just a touch of powder to look paler, weaker. In the mirror, I practiced the expression of a mother worried but resigned, a woman who had been wronged yet still willing to forgive. She needed to see me as vulnerable, not powerful. Only then would the lesson sink in. When the doorbell rang an hour later, my heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from anticipation. I opened the door, and there she was, Angela, my once proud daughter, reduced to a shadow of herself. Her skin was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, her expensive blouse wrinkled and hanging loosely on her thinner frame. She clutched a suitcase with one hand, as though she had run straight from the airport. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a second, it seemed like she would throw herself into my arms, but she stopped, hesitating, as though the memory of her betrayal still held her back. "Come in, dear," I said softly, stepping aside. "You must be exhausted." She entered, her eyes darting around the living room, as though seeing it for the first time. Perhaps she had expected cobwebs and unpaid bills, some pitiful image of the widow she had abandoned. Instead, she saw the same house she had grown up in, tidy and warm. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked. "Yes, please," she murmured, sinking into the chair at the kitchen table. She looked small there, hunched over, her hands trembling slightly as she folded and unfolded a tissue. I set the coffee in front of her and sat down opposite. Silence stretched until finally she spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed the tissue against her face. "It's in the past," I replied gently, though my heart twisted at the memory of that cold phone call in the doctor's office. "No, it's not." She shook her head. "I treated you horribly. I sold the house Dad's truck. I left you with nothing. And now—" Her voice broke again. "Now Edward has left me with nothing. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do." Tears streamed down her cheeks. For a moment, the mother in me stirred, aching to comfort her. But I held back. This was part of the lesson. "What happened with Edward?" I asked quietly. Her lips trembled. "He lied about everything. There was no business in Europe. He was drowning in debt and just wanted to escape. He met some woman there half my age and ran off with her. He left me with the debts, with nothing. And then I come back to this eviction notice." She buried her face in her hands. "Mom, I don't even have the money for a lawyer. I don't have anywhere to go. Can I stay here for a while, just until I figure things out?" There it was, the question I had been waiting for. The woman who had discarded me now sat at my table, begging for shelter. "Of course, honey," I said softly, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "This will always be your home." Her head jerked up, eyes wide with surprise. "Really? After everything I did?" You are my daughter. That will never change." She broke into sobs, leaning forward to hug me. This time, she didn't hold back. She clung to me like a drowning child clutching a lifeline. I hugged her back, but not with the unconditional love of the past. This embrace carried calculation, strategy. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered against my shoulder. "I promise I'll find a job. I won't be a burden." "Don't worry about that now," I soothed. "Rest first. Tomorrow is another day." That evening, Angela unpacked in her old bedroom, the same room she had decorated as a teenager with posters and journals. I watched her quietly from the doorway. The humiliation was written in every movement, every glance at the faded wallpaper she had once mocked. From luxury condos to her childhood room, it was fitting. "Mom," she said softly, holding up a manila envelope she had found among her belongings. "This was in Edward's suitcase. It has your name on it. I thought you should have it." My heart skipped. Another envelope? Robert's handwriting again, neat and deliberate. I opened it slowly, aware of Angela's curious eyes on me. Inside was a short letter and a small brass key. "Clara, if you are reading this after the first envelope, it means our daughter is in trouble. This key opens safety deposit box #247 at the central bank. There you will find something to help her. Use it wisely." Angela gasped. "Dad had a safety deposit box? What's inside?" I folded the letter calmly. "We'll see tomorrow." Her eyes glimmered with desperate hope, and I felt the irony like a blade. Even now, she looked to her father's secret gift, not for the sake of family, but as a solution to her own disaster. But I would let her cling to that hope a little longer. That night, over a simple dinner she insisted on cooking, Angela opened up more. She confessed how Edward had forged her signature, how the banks were hunting her down for debts she hadn't even known existed. "I thought I was building a life with him," she whispered bitterly. "But all I did was ruin everything Dad built, and I hurt you worst of all." Her tears fell again, and this time I let a trace of softness show. She needed to believe she was being forgiven, sheltered. Only then would the eventual truth strike deep enough to change her. After she went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, the brass key heavy in my palm. Robert had known. Somehow, he had known this moment might come. And he had left me not just wealth, but tools to save our daughter. But she wasn't ready to be saved. Not yet. First, she had to learn the full weight of betrayal, her own and Edward's. I turned the key slowly between my fingers, whispering into the shadows. "Not yet, Robert. Tomorrow, we open the box. But tonight, let her sit with her regret." The next morning, Angela hovered in the kitchen like a restless child. She barely touched the toast I had set before her, her eyes darting constantly toward the manila envelope and the small brass key lying on the table. "Mom," she asked for the third time, "when are we going to the bank?" "After breakfast," I said calmly, sipping my coffee. I wanted her to stew in her own anticipation a little longer. For once, she wasn't rushing toward luxury or escape. She was clinging to the chance of salvation from her father, the very man she had forgotten so quickly. The bus ride downtown was silent. Angela pressed her forehead against the window, biting her lip, while I sat upright, the key warm in my hand. When we entered the bank, the marble floors gleamed under the morning light. Everything smelled faintly of polished wood and disinfectant. The clerk verified my ID, then led us to a quiet room lined with safety deposit boxes. Box 247 opened with a heavy metallic click, the sound echoing in the silence. Angela inhaled sharply as I pulled out a medium-sized package wrapped in brown paper. Inside were velvet pouches, each one filled with jewelry. Necklaces heavy with emeralds, bracelets encrusted with diamonds, heirloom rings glinting with rubies and sapphires. My breath caught. Some pieces I recognized: Robert's grandmother's brooch, the pearl necklace he had once given me for our anniversary, but many were new, purchased quietly during the years I thought we lived modestly. Angela's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she reached for a necklace. "Mom, this must be worth a fortune." There was also a letter, folded neatly on top. Robert's handwriting again, precise and steady. "Clara, if you have opened this, it means our daughter has stumbled. These jewels are not just wealth, they are a safeguard. Use them only when she truly needs it. Money earned through labor teaches more than money inherited, but if she is drowning, throw her this rope. With love, Robert." I closed my eyes briefly, the weight of his foresight settling over me. He had always known how to balance mercy with discipline. Angela clutched the emerald necklace as if it were a lifeline. "Mom, we could sell these. We could pay off the debts, maybe even get the beach house back." I studied her face carefully. Even in desperation, her first instinct was to convert memories into currency. She hadn't yet learned the full depth of value. "We'll see," I said softly. Back at home, Angela spread the jewels across the kitchen table, their colors gleaming under the overhead light. She ran her fingers over them like a child with candy, whispering estimates under her breath. "Mom, this could be at least $200,000, she said eagerly. "Maybe more. I could pay off the worst of Edward's loans before the banks come after me. You could finally have some security. We wouldn't have to worry." I watched her silently, letting her taste the illusion. "Are you sure you want to use your father's inheritance for Edward's mistakes?" She froze, the question hanging heavy in the air. Slowly, she lowered her hands from the necklace. "What choice do I have? If I don't pay, they'll take everything." I leaned forward. "Think carefully. Once you sell these jewels, they're gone. You can't get them back. Some of them belong to your grandmother, to me, to Robert's family." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I know, Mom, but what else can I do? I don't have a job, and no one wants to hire someone with debts hanging over her. Edward left me with nothing. I have no choice." There was the first glimmer of truth. She was starting to realize what I had known for months. Easy choices lead to ruin. Hard choices shape character. That night, Angela couldn't sleep. I found her still sitting at the table at midnight, jewels scattered around her like glittering reminders of failure. "Mom," she whispered when she noticed me. "I ruined everything, didn't I? Dad worked his whole life for this, and now I'm going to sell it to pay for Edward's lies." I placed my hand on hers gently. "Angela, your father loved you. He wanted you to have these if you truly needed them. But he also wanted you to learn. That's why he kept them hidden." She broke into sobs, burying her face against her arms. "I thought Edward loved me. I thought I was building something real. But all I did was destroy everything you and Dad gave me." Her tears pierced my heart, but I held my resolve. This was necessary. "People make mistakes, Angela," I said quietly. "The important thing is what you do afterward." The next day, she began visiting jewelers, clutching velvet pouches like a beggar with treasure. She returned home exhausted, her eyes dull, her shoulders sagging. "They'll give me about $180,000 for most of it," she said flatly, dropping a stack of receipts on the table. "It's less than I thought, but enough to cover the worst debts. At least it buys me time." I nodded, though my chest tightened at the sight of Robert's heirlooms reduced to numbers on paper. "If that's what you think is best." Her lips quivered. "I don't know what's best anymore. I just want to stop drowning." That evening, when Angela had finally collapsed into sleep, my phone rang. Mr. Peterson's calm voice filled the room. "Mrs. Brooks, we have uncovered something important." Edward not only forged Angela's signature, he also attempted a fraudulent marriage in Paris to obtain residency. We now have proof he committed deliberate identity fraud. This could free Angela from all responsibility for his debts. I felt my breath catch. "Are you certain?" "Yes. With this evidence, Angela could be cleared completely, but it will take weeks of legal work. I need your authorization to begin." "Yes," I said firmly. "Start immediately, but do not tell her yet. She needs to believe she has no one but herself to rely on." "As you wish." When I hung up, I stood at the window, watching Angela sleep in her old room, curled like a child. She thought she had salvaged herself by selling jewels. She thought she had learned humility by accepting a cleaning job, but she didn't yet know that her salvation was already secured. Robert had left me the power to save her, but only after she had walked through the fire. I whispered into the darkness, clutching the brass key once more. "Not yet, Robert. Let her learn. Let her feel. When the time is right, I'll show her the truth, but not a moment before." Angela began her new job the following week. It was nothing like the glamorous positions she once dreamed of. No sleek offices, no business-class flights, no glittering evenings with Edward by her side. Instead, she took the only work she could find, cleaning offices at night. I watched her leave the house on that first evening, shoulders hunched, dressed in a plain uniform too big for her frame. The woman who once strutted in heels through luxury condos now carried a bucket and mop. "Are you sure you can handle it?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Her jaw tightened. "I have no choice, Mom. I need to earn something. I can't live off your kindness forever. I let her go, my heart torn between pity and grim satisfaction. This was the education Robert and I had always hoped she would never need, but now it was the only way. When she came home at dawn, she collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, her face pale and her hands raw from scrubbing. I poured her tea and set it down without a word. She sipped slowly, eyes glazed. It was harder than I thought, she admitted. But the other women helped me. Mrs. Johnson, she's 60, been cleaning for 20 years. She told me tricks to make it easier. Her lips trembled. But there was something new in her eyes, not just despair, but resilience. She said something to me. Angela continued, her voice low. She said there are two kinds of people who end up cleaning offices, those who never had opportunities and those who wasted the ones they were given. She asked me which one I was. And what did you tell her? I asked. The truth, that I had every opportunity, a loving family, a stable home, an inheritance, and I threw it away for a worthless man. Her tears came then, but they weren't the shallow tears of self-pity. They were raw, jagged tears of recognition. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Honesty is the first step, Angela. Now you can start building something new. Days turned into weeks. Angela worked nights and slept during the day, her body growing leaner but stronger. Sometimes I heard her crying quietly in her room, but other times she hummed while cooking dinner or folded laundry without being asked. The woman who once barked orders at me now washed my dishes and swept the floors. She was beginning to understand the dignity of labor. Still, the debts haunted her. Every envelope that arrived in the mail made her flinch. Every phone call froze her in place. One evening, she sat down heavily at the table, rubbing her temples. Mom, I don't know how much longer I can do this. The banks won't stop calling. Even with the money from the jewels, I can't cover everything. And what if they come after you? I touched her arm gently. This is your burden, Angela. But remember, burdens can also be teachers. Her eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't argue. She was learning to carry her shame rather than run from it. Meanwhile, I worked silently in the shadows. Mr. Peterson updated me regularly. The legal process was underway. Evidence against Edward was mounting, and soon Angela would be free of the debts. Are you ready to tell her? He asked one afternoon. Not yet, I said firmly. She's not ready to believe in her own strength if she thinks money will save her. She needs to feel she has clawed her way back from the bottom first. You're a strategic woman, Mrs. Brooks, he said with a hint of admiration. I smiled faintly. No, I'm a mother. One rainy night, Angela returned from work soaked to the skin, her uniform clinging to her shivering body. I hurried to wrap her in a blanket, my heart aching at the sight. Why didn't you take a cab? I asked. I wanted to save the money, she whispered. Every dollar counts. She fell asleep on the sofa, curled under the blanket, her face pale but peaceful. Watching her, I realized something had shifted. She was no longer just surviving, she was fighting. The next morning, over breakfast, she looked at me with new determination. Mom, I've been thinking. I want to go back to school. Not now, not while I'm drowning, but soon. I want to study social work. I want to help women who end up like me, trapped, betrayed, with nowhere to turn. Her words stunned me. This was not the Angela who had sold her father's truck for a quick profit. This was a woman who had begun to see beyond herself. That's a noble dream, Angela, I said softly. She nodded, her eyes bright. But I'll pay for it myself. I don't want handouts. I need to know I earned it. I hid my smile behind my teacup. She was changing faster than I had hoped. That evening, Aurora stopped by with her usual basket of bread. She glanced at Angela, who was sweeping the kitchen floor. Clara, she whispered to me later, your daughter looks different, humble, softer, as if she finally understands. She's learning, I said simply. Aurora studied me carefully. And you look different too. Stronger. Are you hiding something from me? I only smiled. We all hide something, Aurora. The question is why. That night, after Angela had gone to work, I sat at the kitchen table with Robert's documents spread before me. The candlelight flickered across the deeds, the bank statements, the evidence of Edward's fraud. The end was near. Angela's debts would soon be wiped clean. The jewels were gone, but her dignity was slowly returning. The time to reveal the truth was approaching. But not yet. She had one final step to take, accepting that her life would never return to the comfort of before, and learning to find peace in that. I whispered into the silence, as though Robert were listening. "She's almost ready, my love. One more push, and she will finally understand. Then I'll show her everything you left behind." I closed the folders, blew out the candle, and sat in the dark. The lesson was nearly complete. The morning of the final meeting dawned crisp and bright, as if the sky itself knew something important was about to happen. Angela sat at the kitchen table nervously twisting her hands. Her uniform hung over the chair. She had taken the day off from work. She looked more fragile than ever, but also calmer, like a soldier who had finally accepted the battle. "Mom," she whispered, "are you sure this lawyer can help me? I don't have money for expensive fees." I smiled faintly, my secret heavy in my chest. "Don't worry, Angela. Just come with me. Listen to what he has to say." She nodded, though doubt clouded her eyes. At Mr. Peterson's office, the marble floor gleamed under the morning light. He greeted us warmly, shaking Angela's trembling hand. "Miss Brooks, Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming." Angela forced a nervous smile. "Thank you for seeing me. But I should warn you, my financial situation is a disaster. I can't pay much." "That's exactly what we're here to talk about," Peterson said gently. He handed her a thick folder. "Please, read this carefully." Angela opened it, her eyes scanning line after line of legal documents. Her expression shifted, first confusion, then shock, then disbelief. "These papers say," her voice shook, "they say Edward forged my signature, that I'm not responsible for his debts?" "That's correct," Peterson replied. "We have gathered evidence of fraud. With this, you are free of liability. The banks cannot touch you." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "But how? Who? Who paid for this investigation?" Peterson glanced at me. The moment had come. I took a deep breath. "Angela, there's something you don't know." She looked at me, bewildered. "What do you mean?" I nodded to Peterson. He handed her a second folder, heavier than the first. Inside were deeds, bank statements, investment certificates, the entire fortune Robert had built in silence. Angela's breath caught. "Mom, this says you own the building I lived in. You have properties, bank accounts, investments. All this time?" "Yes." "And the beach house? Dad's truck? They weren't gone?" I held her gaze steadily. "I already reclaimed them." She stared at me, her face pale, her lips trembling. "How long have you known this?" "Since the day you called me from the doctor's office." Her voice cracked, rising. "You mean all these weeks? When I cried every night? When I scrubbed floors? When I begged you for help, you already had all this? You could have saved me?" "Yes." She slammed the folder shut, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why, Mom? Why would you let me suffer like that?" The silence in the room was heavy. Even Mr. Peterson lowered his eyes, giving us privacy. "Because," I said finally, my voice low but firm, "you needed to learn. Money could have solved your debts, but it couldn't fix your heart. You betrayed me, Angela. You sold our memories, discarded me like garbage. If I had rescued you immediately, you would have walked away unchanged. You had to feel what it means to hit rock bottom. Only then could you rise again." Angela's tears fell harder. "I abandoned you when you needed me most, and you still saved me?" "Yes, but not in the way you expected." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she closed the folder and met my gaze. Her eyes no longer carried arrogance or entitlement. They carried something deeper, respect. "Mom," she whispered, "do you forgive me?" "I forgave you the moment you walked through my door. The question is, can you forgive yourself?" Her lips trembled. "I don't know. I did terrible things. People make mistakes. The measure of who we are is what we do afterward." Peterson cleared his throat softly. "Miss Brooks, your legal problems are resolved. You're free." He stood, excusing himself, leaving us alone in the office. Angela turned to me again. "Even if you didn't have all this money, even if you were really the poor widow I thought you were, I think I would have learned the same lesson. That nothing matters more than love that endures, even when you don't deserve it." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "That's what your father wanted for you. That's what I wanted too." The following weeks passed like a dream. Angela kept her cleaning job, though she no longer needed it. "I need to finish what I started," she told me one evening, pulling on her uniform. I can't just erase those lessons. They're part of me now. I smiled with quiet pride. The spoiled daughter who once dismissed everything I gave her now chose humility over comfort. Aurora visited often, her sharp eyes taking everything in. "Clara," she said one afternoon over tea, "I don't know what you did, but your daughter has changed. She's softer, stronger. And you look like a queen holding a secret." I only smiled. Perhaps the secret is that love sometimes wears the mask of cruelty, but its heart is always mercy. Months later, Angela applied for a master's program in social work. When the acceptance letter came, she burst into tears. "Mom," she said, clutching the envelope, "I want to dedicate my life to helping women like me, women who thought they had nothing left. I want to use what I've learned and what you've taught me to make a difference." Robert would have been proud. One Sunday, Angela and I visited the beach house together. The sun set over the ocean, painting the waves gold. We sat on the porch Robert had built, side by side, sipping tea. "Mom," Angela said softly, "I want to turn this house into a shelter. For women escaping abuse, for mothers with nowhere to go, a place of safety, like it was for us." Tears pricked my eyes. "That's a beautiful idea, Angela. Your father would have loved it." We sat in silence, watching the waves crash against the shore. For the first time in years, my heart was at peace. The daughter I had lost to greed and arrogance was gone. In her place sat a woman who had walked through the fire and come out stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. That night, back home, I stepped onto the porch and looked up at the stars. "Robert," I whispered into the night air, "we did it. She finally understands." And for the first time since his death, I felt as though he answered, "I always knew you would." Justice had come, not as revenge, but as transformation. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.